everyone, it's Lisa from I Dream in Soap and welcome to my channel. I thought I'd do something a little bit different this week and do a bit of a question and answer session, or a little bit of a, get to know me type thing. Now, I didn't ask for questions to be submitted, and maybe that's something I can do in the future if you like this type of video. What I've done is I've sort of picked up some common questions that I get asked through YouTube comments and emails and that sort of thing, and I thought I would just put some of those most frequently asked questions into a little video. So let's make a start, shall we? First of all, perhaps just a little bit of a background about me. As you know, or hopefully you know, my name's Lisa and I'm the maker behind I Dream in Soap. In the past, or let's say my professional career as it was, I was a chartered accountant. For those of you in the US, that's I think what you call a CPA, so chartered accountant, but I didn't spend long actually working in the accountancy public practice as it were. What happened was quite quickly I became an accounting tutor. So what I did was I worked for a professional education firm, and there we taught accountants, lawyers, doctors, that sort of thing, and I was in the accountancy division, and we taught students for their professional exams. So I spent 30 years of my life training people to pass their professional accountancy exam. So I've had quite a background in sort of professional teaching. That also may explain why as well. You see that I'm quite happy at dealing with what we call soapy maths and calculations. So maybe that'll just explain where some of that background comes from. Now, I loved my job as my accountancy tuition firm. It was a lovely firm to work with, but when I became involved in soap making and I Dream in Soap started to take off, it got to the point where the business was big enough for me to be able to give up my job, which was fantastic. So a few years ago I became a soap maker full time, and from that point we've managed to grow the business more, and so that now Paul, Mr. I Dream in Soap, has also managed to be able to give up his job, and for about the last year he's worked for I Dream in Soap too. So it's the two of us working together to run the business, and to be honest, goodness me, I do need him. I got to the point where I'm a very early morning person, so I was sort of getting up and starting work at about 3 AM in the morning, and to be honest I still do that. And with packing orders and things, that was taking so much of my time up that it was really difficult for me to concentrate on other things. So it's been really good having Paul on board and having him being able to be involved in things like the packing orders and sending stuff out. And also he does a lot of the 3D printing work for me as well, for things like the extruder discs and the scrapers and everything that we send out. So it's been fantastic having him on board. The next thing I thought I would talk about is sort of the way I approach my soap making, my ethos, that sort of thing. I'm really interested, and maybe this comes from my background as well, is always learning and improving. When I was brought up, a common phrase we always heard from our mum, and I'm sure you've heard it before, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So therefore, it was always the case of striving to do things as well as you possibly can. But the other thing I really enjoy with learning is that it never bothers me really if I make a mistake. I don't like to make unnecessary mistakes, so I will plan and I will think about things I will do. I'm a real believer in, if you just keep repeating the same thing, you're going to come out with the same outcome. So anytime I do something, I will analyse it and think about what could be done better, what did I really like, and learn from that going forward. Now, some people say, well, we're really critical of ourselves. And I think that's a good thing. You can be critical of yourself, but without getting down on yourself. I'm a real believer in someone maybe criticising is really the wrong word that we need. Someone appraising, someone giving you feedback, someone being critical, as it were, about your work, or indeed you yourself, is the best way that we can learn. There's nothing wrong if you've done, let's say, a layered soap and it's slightly wonky. Think about, why did it go wonky and how could you improve it and learn from it and go forward? One of the things I always just used to say to my students when I was teaching them for their accountancy exams was to try and attempt questions, hard questions, perhaps before they were really ready for it. And I used to find that students would say to me, yeah, but if I'm not really ready for it, then I'll get down because I won't be able to do it. And my view was always, try. I'd much rather you tried to do something and got it halfway right, because then you will have learnt what it is you don't understand. If you attempt something that you know you can do, well, quite frankly, I think that's a waste of time when we're talking about an exam situation. If you sit there and practice questions and you can do them in tick, 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 I got them all right, that's a nice boost, but that's frankly an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of wasted time. You've just done something you could already do. And I kind of feel like that with soap making as well. Every time you make a soap, challenge yourself. Think about something that you can do that's a little bit different, that's a little bit new, that's a little bit scary. Think about it, plan it, and see if you can make it work. If it doesn't go completely right, think about why. See if you can learn from it. And then, even if you've got a soap that you go, oh no, look, it's really horrible. And we all have those, don't we? As long as you've learned from it, that's not a wasted experience. That's a massively valuable experience. The only time you should be sad about when you've got horrible soap that's gone really badly is if you didn't plan from it. With soap making, I often see people or hear people say, whoa, soap making's a bit of a wild ride, you never know what's going to happen. I don't believe in that philosophy. I think the only time you should really be caught out with your soap making is if you haven't thought about what you're doing, if you haven't researched properly, like for example, you don't know how your fragrance oil is going to behave, you don't know if it's going to discolour or accelerate, you haven't got a clue what temperature you're soaping at. If you're not prepared, you're going to have all of these horrible mishaps. But generally, soap making shouldn't be a wild ride. You should have planned and know what's going to happen. And if you're caught out by something, learn from it. Think about it. Why did it go wrong? And what can I learn from it going forward? And then don't make that mistake again. So I think I've gone a bit off track there, but learning, as you can see, learning, I love improving. And that'll be one of the things I always do when I try and attack a new technique. I'll never just look at a technique that somebody's done and go, oh, that's how they do it, I'll do it the same. I think about how they do it and why it works how it does, and maybe potentially is that the best way to do it. And I'm very questioning in what I do. I often question a lot of things, you know, quite often, I must admit, I do tend to stay a little bit out of Facebook forums and things like that because there's so much bad advice given in a lot of the Facebook groups by people who give advice in a way that sounds so convincing, but quite frankly it's wrong. Or people who just blindly follow rules that, why? Just because somebody else has told you them? So I'm always of the opinion that I test things. If someone said do this like this, I always think, why? Why do I have to do it like that? And I'll either research it, I'll try it like that, and then I'll think, maybe I can tweak that and do it in a slightly different way that may be better. Why do I have to do it like that? What is it? Is it just some rule that somebody's made up without any reason? So I'm always very questioning about what it is that we do and why we do things. And then I get my own set of rules of, yes, this is a rule that I think does apply, or actually, that's something people have just made up and they all stick to, and there's no reason for it, so let's do something different. And then one of my other rules I have, as much as possible when I'm making soap, is, apart from obviously always trying my best, is when I make a bar of soap, For me, it's really important that that design that I make goes all the way through the bar. And that can often make it a lot harder to actually make a bar of soap. I personally, now I know a lot of people do this, so please, if you're someone that does this, and that's fine for you. I personally, especially as I sell my soaps, really don't like the idea of surface decoration. Okay? I don't like the idea that somebody has potentially bought a soap. All right, they might like it for its soapy qualities and for its fragrance, but certainly this type of soaps that I sell, people are often buying them for the design as well. And to me, the idea that a design may just be on the surface, they'll use the soap a few times and then the design will wash off, is a no-go for me. So therefore, as I said, my designs will typically go all the way through the soap. Sometimes we'll have something like a soap challenge where a technique is a surface design, and I will do those challenges because it's a soap challenge of the month and I always like to do new techniques. So I'm not saying I'll never do it, but there has to be a really good reason for me to do it. So you'll never see me like doing mica painting or just stamping on my soap or doing a little stencil or just something on the top that's going to wash off. And that's why I don't do a lot of those techniques on my channel. It will typically be, my techniques will be going all the way through the soap. And that's just personally because that's something that is important for me. Environmentally friendly issues. Now, I'm only going to do a little bit on this. Mind you, I know, I always say that and then I'll probably go on one for ages. One of the reasons I started making my own soap in the first place, just as for personal reasons, was because of the whole thing about single-use plastics and everything that's damaging the environment. So this was one of the reasons, apart from it looked like an awful lot of fun, and it is, that I started to make my own soap. Environmental issues are really important to me, and I do try my hardest to minimise the amount of plastics that I use in my soap making. Now, I'm not an eco-warrior by any means, and I do use plastic. So for example, when I make soap dough, I will shrink wrap my soap dough in vacuum seal bags. And that is plastic, but I must admit, I will never use it as single-use plastic. Every one of those bags will get opened up, reused, washed. Quite often you'll find with me, I'll have my washing line out in the garden and I'll have a whole load of bags on it that have been reused time and time and time again. I don't like the word disposable. So things like gloves that we wear when we make our soap. I wear mine until they literally wear out. So therefore I do have, gosh, I think I bought a pack of something like 100 pairs of disposable gloves about 4 years ago. And I'm still only a little way through them. They're still well over half, maybe even 3/4 full. I wear them. I'm very careful with them. Obviously, if they get a hole or get punctured or get ripped, then I do throw them away. But I wash them up each time that I use them. And I make sure that I get them dried nicely, and then I'll use them again and again and again till they wear out. The same thing with things like packaging. It's one of my hardest things I find when I'm bringing in a new product. I can spend pretty well as long deciding on the packaging for that product and researching the packaging for that product as making the actual product itself. Because it's important for me that as far as I can, my packaging should be as eco-friendly as possible. So typically my soaps are wrapped in paper or in a box. I have a cardboard band around them. My anything that I use in a sort of plastic looking bag is a Nature Flex bag, which is a compostable, biodegradable bag. So I do try very, very hard to make sure that I use as much single-use packaging, as little, that was terrible, wasn't it? As little single-use packaging as I can. Certainly when we buy things like oils and that come in, they will come in plastic bottles, and there's not a lot that we can do about that. I'm not in a position to buy great big 25-gallon drums of oil and store them. So there are plastics coming in, but again, with things like bottles and that, I will tend to reuse them. I'll take a bottle and I'll chop the bottom of it, and then I'll use that base again as a container. So yeah, I try. It is important to me, and I will always try my hardest to do that when I'm dealing with any sort of plasticky type things that we use when making our soap. The next thing I thought I'd talk about is our UK regulations. I'm sure most of you know, and if you don't, I'm in the UK. So in England, in the United Kingdom, and in the UK, we have to follow very strict cosmetic regulations, and that applies for Europe as well. Technically, the UK has left the EU, but we're still part of Europe as such, but the UK did adopt or keep the EU cosmetic regulations, even though we left the EU itself. So we're still applying the rules and regulations that anyone in the EU has to. And what that means for us is that we have strict rules and regulations relating to a cosmetic. Now, you might think, well, soap isn't a cosmetic, and I know in a lot of places it's not deemed to be a cosmetic. For us in the UK, a cosmetic is anything that's intended for use on the skin. So that will include things like you would classify normally as cosmetics, so things like your makeup, your foundation and all that sort of stuff, but also includes anything else: shampoos, deodorants, soap, bubble bars, bath bombs, all that sort of stuff. Anything that's intended to come in contact with your skin is actually classed as a cosmetic, and therefore it has to follow the, let's just call them the UK. It's UK/EU, isn't it? UK cosmetic regulations. Wax melts, I make wax melts as well, but because they're not intended to come in contact with the skin, that's not their purpose. I know you do touch them, but that's not their purpose. They don't fall under these regulations. And there's a whole different list of labelling regulations that I'm not going to go into those, called CLP regulations, that we have to follow for those. We like a regulation in the UK. Now, if you've been with me for quite a while, you may have noticed some of my older videos. I talked a lot about assessments and UK regulations. You may have also noticed that I don't do that so much nowadays, and two reasons for that. A while ago, gosh, it was a year or a couple of years ago, I got to the point where I said, the assessments are stressing me out. I'm going to change the way I make my soap. For those of you who aren't aware of what an assessment is, in the UK, every time we make a cosmetic, we have to get it cosmetically assessed, and it has to have a cosmetic product safety report on that, let's just say soap, but any cosmetic. And to do that, what we have to do is we have to list down our recipe, exactly our recipe, so how much coconut oil, olive oil, every single ingredient's in our recipe, even down to the colourants and the fragrance that we use. So if you use 0.2 grams of shimmer blue mica and 0.3 grams of activated charcoal, all of those things get listed down exactly in your recipe. That recipe is then sent off to a cosmetic chemist. They will look through your recipe, see if it's an okay recipe, see if it's safe. They will produce a safety report on it, they'll analyse it and all of that sort of stuff, and then they will either approve or reject your recipe. Now, to be honest, recipes don't get rejected that often. What they'll often come back to you and do is they'll say, you can't have that much of this in it, but if you lower it to this amount, that will be fine. Okay, so they'll help you get those assessments, those recipes passed. And once you've done that, that means that that recipe you can use to make soaps that you can then sell. If you do not have one of these cosmetic product safety reports, you are not legally allowed to sell your soap in the UK or Europe. And that's the same for example, if you make soap in the USA, you're not allowed to sell your soap to the UK without one of these cosmetic product safety reports. Okay, so you need one of these reports. Now the thing is, once you've got one of these reports, that's great. Well, it's sort of great. It's great that I can sell my soap, but with the sort of great bit comes from the fact that you cannot change that assessment. So if you've got an assessment that has all your base oils in it, a certain fragrance, and let's say, what do we say, 0.2 grams of 1 mica, 0.3 grams of activated charcoal, you have to make your soap with those exact things in it every single time you make the soap. You can't leave anything out. You can't change anything, you can't change the quantities, you can change the pattern, the design, but it's got to use those exact things. So that's why, as I said, you might find in some of my older videos, I'm talking about, gosh, how I'm a little bit frustrated about how I'm making things to meet an assessment. And you might even find some soaps that I've made that I've used a colour that I didn't want to because it was in my assessment and I had to get it in there somewhere to make it a legally saleable soap, which quite frankly is a little bit ludicrous. So that was really tight restrictions that we do have in the UK. And so therefore, what I decided to do, as I said a couple of years ago, is rather than keep going back and trying to force my soaps to fit in with these assessments that I have, I then said, right, each time I make a soap, I'm just going to get newly assessed. The problem with that, obviously, is it takes a while to send off your recipe and get it assessed and all of that sort of stuff. Normally, you're fine, it will come back in the period that you're curing your soap, but also it costs quite a lot of money to have these done. We have to pay for an assessment every single time we have a soap assessed. And if you think, every time I make a soap, I make a different soap. So every single time, it's basically like adding it onto a cost of another quite costly ingredient that you have to pay for this certification for your soap. So it adds to the cost of our soaps. Okay, so those are our UK cosmetic assessments. Now, what's happened recently, maybe about last year or so really, is that some of our cosmetic assessors have started to offer, and it's been such a blessing, such a relief, flexible assessments. And this is something that a lot of assessors, and some of them still, are refusing to do. You know, they like you to give them a strict list of your recipe, and even though, as we know, why does it matter if you swap one mica for another? There's no safety implications. They were refusing to let you do that. They were refusing to give you any flexibility at all. We've now got some assessors who are allowing us to have flexible assessments, and it's just made my life so much easier. And that's why I don't necessarily talk about assessments so much in my videos. So what happens now is I can go to one of these wonderful cosmetic assessors and I still have to get an assessment. And what we get is like a flexible assessment where you give them your base recipe. So we're not changing our base recipe, we have to stick with our normal base recipe and that's it. Can't change that. But then what you can do is you can typically choose like 10 colours. So therefore you choose 10 micas. Okay, and obviously if you're sensible, you're going to not choose 5 greens, 2 blues and a yellow or anything. You know, you're going to give a nice range of colours. And you'll find 10 will give you quite a good bit of flexibility. And then on top of that, you can add a certain number of fragrance oils. So it might be 6 fragrance oils, 10 fragrance oils, just depending on how much the package is going to cost you. And what that then does, which is so brilliant, is they'll give you a limit of how much fragrance you can use. And typically in the UK, it's 3% fragrance in your soap. Okay. So you'll get, let's say you've got 6 fragrances listed in this assessment. I can use any of these fragrances up to 3%. I'm not allowed to mix or blend them, but I can use any of them, which is great. And then obviously my colorants, I can use any of those up to, gosh, I think they say something like 5% or something. To be honest, I don't take any notice of the amount because 5% would be a hugely ludicrous amount of mica to use in your soap. So you'd never breach that regulation. So I know with my assessments now, as long as I've taken a check of, I don't change my recipe, so I'm happy with that. So as long as when I go, right, I'm going to use, let's say, Loving Spell for a soap, I will then look for my assessment that's got loving spell in it, and I'll take a note of the colours I'm allowed to use, and I'll design my soap using those colours. So I still stick within my regulations. I know I'm not going to go over the limit on the colours because, gosh, that would just be far too much. But now I can have a lot more free rein on making my soaps, and it's been truly amazing for me. So oh gosh, it's just been such a wonderful change, and I was so excited when these changes actually came through, just from certain assessors. Not all of the assessors are doing it, but it's made my life so much easier. If you're someone that just makes the same soap over and over and over and over again, then the rigid assessments are fine, but they don't work for me. Okay, so that's sort of what we're doing at the moment with our assessments. The other thing we have to do in the UK with any cosmetic products that we make is to record them on the UK Cosmetic Portal. Now that sounds like a quite exciting thing, doesn't it? A portal that sounds sort of like spacey. It's not. It's a boring database thing. So anytime we put a product on the market, now on the market doesn't just mean selling it. So in the UK and Europe, whether we sell a soap, if we want to give out samples for testing to customers, if we want to donate soap to a food bank, any of those things count as needing a cosmetic assessment and needing to go onto this portal. Basically, the only time we're allowed to give soap or any product away if it's to very close family and friends. Okay, that's it. We can't just give it away without all the other stuff going to it. So what this cosmetic portal is, as I said, it's basically a database, and it's a safety thing. So let's say that you've sold a soap and someone has a problem with it. They get taken ill and they have an allergic reaction and something hideous happens. They will then take that soap, let's say maybe to the hospital or whatever, or someone will go, what did you use? And they'll go, oh, it was this thing, and they'll track down the soap and the label on the soap. And then what will happen is the authorities will search this cosmetic portal for your soap. Now you would have listed your soap with the name that you'd had on the label of it, and it would also be registered to you as the responsible person. So I Dream in Soap, Lisa Cunningham, responsible person. And they would be able to track that through the information on your label. And what we have to enter is things like obviously what the product is, what its name is. We have to answer lots of questions like whether there are any nanoparticles in it, whether there's anything that the National Poisons Authority needs to know about. You know, certain things like essential oils and that have to be listed. We also have to load up our recipe of what we've actually used in our soap, and also a photo or illustration of the label itself. So someone can look at it and go, oh, here's a soap called, I don't know, chocolate banana soap. Okay, chocolate banana soap by I Dream in Soap. I've never made one of those. They'll look at it, they'll see the label, they'll go, yeah, that's it. And then they'll look at all the ingredients and that you've listed. So therefore that will give them the ability that if they needed to treat someone for something that happened, they've got all the information that they need. And we have to fill in this database every single time we want to list something on the UK markets. And this whole thing about cosmetic regulations and that is, it's taken quite seriously in the UK. If you fail to register a product on the cosmetic portal, then you could be imprisoned or you could be fined up to, I think it's £5,000, it might be £3,000, I'm not 100% sure. It could be £5,000 per product that you fail to register. And again, that's anything that's being sold into the UK. So again, if you're overseas, you can't sell products to the UK unless you can list them on this portal. And the only way you can list them on the portal is by having a responsible person who is based in the UK. Whew, there we go. There's a lot of regulations around it in the UK, and it obviously is difficult, especially for new soap makers, and it can be quite off-putting to try and get involved in all of that aspect as well. So you can see it's something that takes a big part of my job. The next thing I thought I'd talk about is Recipes. Now I've kind of touched on what we have to do with our recipes in the UK. And again, I don't get asked that often, I must admit, but every now and again I'll get asked to what my recipe is. And I must admit, I don't share my recipe. Now, recipe sharing is a personal choice. Some people go, well, what's the problem with it? Just be generous, give it out to everyone, who cares? Don't be so uptight about it. And other people go, well, no, it's a trade secret. You know, it's my recipe, why would I give it out to people? I'm kind of in the second camp, and I've got good reasons for it. I don't share my recipe for a number of reasons. First of all, on my YouTube channel is not about making basic soap. There are loads of channels up there and loads of websites and everything where you can get basic soap making recipes. I feel that I try to give an awful lot of information about soap making techniques. I don't just set my videos to music and just pour and not explain what's going on. I try and give a lot of information, and I feel with my YouTube channel that's what I'm about. It's about how to do techniques using a recipe that you've developed, and giving you the skills and the techniques to do all these wonderful things in your soap making. And for me, that's where I try and give to people and share my knowledge. Another couple of reasons for not sharing my recipe, apart from the fact that it's my recipe, I've had to pay to have it assessed and work really hard on it, is I think it's really important that as a soap maker you understand and learn about things. And the understanding and learning, one of the most fundamental things of being a soap maker is how to construct a recipe that you like. And I do find that if people are just giving away things free, if people just go, here's a recipe, here's a recipe, here's a recipe, I don't think they really care about them. They've just gathered these things for free. They might try it, they may not try it, but there's no real ownership there. They've just got this thing for free and that's great. So I don't want something that I've worked a long time to make the best that I can make it. I don't want other people to just go, yeah, I got this for free, I've got 25 other recipes for free, I might use it, might not. You know, that lack of ownership, as it were. Also, as I've said, learning is really important. I think it's so important for someone to get a soap recipe, whether it's a real basic, you know, some people just use like a third coconut oil, a third olive oil and a third, I don't know, some palm oil or something like that. Start with a basic recipe. Think about what you like about it, think about what you don't like about it, and then learn and research and make some improvements to the recipe. And from that you gain so much knowledge about soap making and how the different oils affect how you make your soap. And that's a massively important step, I think, for making soap. The understanding about what's in the soap and how those different ingredients react. And you'll never learn that if you just pick up a recipe and don't really understand why those things are in there. I have found in the past, I've tried this on numerous occasions, where somebody has said to me, I really struggle, my soap thickens really quickly or something, tell me your recipe. And I'll say, sorry, I'm not willing to share my recipe publicly, but if you tell me your recipe and what it is you don't like about it, I'll work with you and help you improve it. I've said that on a reasonably regular basis to people. And let's say I've done it to, must be about 50 or 60 people that have asked for my recipe, where I've gone back with that response. The number of times people have ever come back to me with a, that's great, come on, let's go for it, here's my recipe. How many times? Once. Only ever as one person said, right, this is what it is. And to me that shows me that often that when people ask for a recipe, it's because they just want something for nothing. And even though you offer an olive branch, or you offer a, I'll help you, they don't want to put in the work. They either don't want to share their recipe, so why should I share mine? Or they don't want to put in the work and work with you and get that understanding. And to me, I'm always someone who will be about teaching people to understand rather than just giving stuff for free where no one ever picks up any skills. And that's why, again, in my YouTube channel, I do try to explain why I'm doing things rather than just do them without any explanation. And then I guess the last thing about my recipe, and one of the reasons I've kind of already touched on as well, is remember in the UK we are kind of stuck with our recipe. It's not flexible like in other countries where you go, whoa, I'm going to do this and I'm going to change this and I'm going to put palm oil in this time, or I'm not going to put this in and I can muck around and I can change this. We can't do that. Again, we have our fixed recipes that we get assessed in the UK, and that's the recipe that we stick with. We can't make changes to that base recipe. I guess in theory, yes, we can, but certainly then it's a case of getting everything reassessed again. So to me, my recipe is my recipe. It's the one that I use for every single solid bar of soap that I make. It never gets changed. And then last couple of things, just quickly, because I'm sure I've been going on too long. First of those, social media. What do I think about it? I struggle with it, to be honest. It's one of my least liked parts of the whole I Dream in Soap business. Now, I love sharing my knowledge. I do really love helping people and encouraging people and trying to teach people. So that aspect of producing videos, I love. And again, another question that I've been asked so many times, do I teach classes? I don't, but I am in the process at the moment, and I'm getting there. I've recorded loads of videos for it of setting up my own online school. So there will be something coming. But back to YouTube, I love sharing and I love trying to teach people and encourage people, and I find that really amazing. But the whole social media things, I find it really difficult. YouTube takes a huge amount of time. To produce a video, ignoring the making the soap, the cutting the soap, the filming the soap, anything like that, ignoring all of that, it takes hours to obviously edit a video. Now my videos can often be quite long. You know, I can make a bar of soap or a loaf of soap and it can take 15 hours, you know, throughout a day. I'll do other things in between, and then that's a lot of video I have to edit down and try and get it into 20 minutes or so. So that's why you never see me talking about scraping out my bowls and stuff like that, because there's just no time to doing it. But yeah, overall the editing process takes hours to do. I try and do my social media all on one day. So I will typically on a Tuesday, I will start at probably about 4 o'clock in the morning. 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning. I get up early. It's a natural thing. I had a horse for years, and so I always get up early. So I do that, and then I will work pretty solidly through to about 6 or 7 that night. And in that time I will edit my YouTube video, I will prepare my thumbnails, I'll upload it onto YouTube and all that sort of stuff. But also as well, I'll do my other social media. I only do Instagram and Facebook. I cannot cope with doing anything else, you know, TikTok and all that sort of stuff. I don't even go anywhere near them because I haven't got time. I'm sure there's probably things I can do better. So I try to then do something to post up onto those, one thing every day. And to be honest, I share. You know, I use Vista Social, and that posts the same thing to Instagram and to Facebook. So therefore I will decide on one thing that's going up each day. The way things are going at the moment, it requires a lot of reels, so that means making lots of mini videos underneath a minute, and the occasional photo. And so therefore again, I need to make all of those, edit all of those, and that will be from the footage that I already have. Those then need to obviously be uploaded. You have to do captions and write little bits to go with them as well. And it all takes, and that literally takes that solid day from early in the morning till quite late at night, a solid day. And then on top of that, obviously comments and things. So throughout the week, you're still spending time going in and answering comments and questions and things. So it is an awful, awful lot of work. And I must admit, I see it as sort of a necessary evil, as it were, of it's just something that has to be done in the way that we do business nowadays. My favourite is YouTube. And as I said, apart from the admin side of actually producing a video, I love sharing stuff with you guys, and I love doing the videos, but it's just the hard work that goes with it as well. Oh, very last thing, Soap Challenge Club. You all know me for being a member of the Soap Challenge Club. I'm not officially associated with it in any way. I was a member of their bubble support for about a year or so, just until it got, I just got too busy to do that role anymore. I love the Soap Challenge Club. I've been doing the Soap Challenge Club since I was really quite a new soaper. I was about 4-5 months into my soap making when I did my first challenge. It's a brilliant thing to do. If you're a soap maker, I would encourage anyone to give it a go. It just really gets into the realm of making you improve your soap making and giving you lots of ideas about things that you can do. A lot of people worry about the challenges and think, oh, it's full of brilliant soap makers, but it's full of all levels of soap makers. We have people who've only done 1 or 2 bars of soap, up to some people who are truly amazing soap makers. The classes are divided into 3 levels. There's regular, advanced and a winners category, so you'll find a place that you'll slot in. And within those categories, everyone just slots in somewhere. You may be good enough to win a category, but it's incredibly unlikely. There can only be 1 winner, but you'll fit in somewhere. And the whole club is just so encouraging and friendly, and you'll learn so much. So it is definitely something that I think has been a real asset to my soap making, and if you're in a little bit of a rut or anything, or would like to improve, it's certainly something that I would advise doing. Do I win the Soap Challenge Club? Now and again. It's pretty rare. There are some amazing soapers in there. I have to enter the winners category, which is the top category, and you have winners in all the other categories as well. So every now and again I'm lucky enough to win. The votes, the way it works is you submit a photo of your soap, and then everyone else who is a member of the club gets to vote on the soaps. So if you're in the Soap Challenge Club, you vote on who will be the winners. So every now and again I'm lucky enough to get enough votes, more often than not that I don't. I do tend to normally place pretty high. I can often be found in the top 3, which is brilliant, but there certainly are quite a lot of people who will often beat me quite regularly, and I definitely do not win as much as some other people who are in there. So as I said, it's definitely something that's worth giving a go to. Whew, right, I'm going to stop now. Goodness knows how long I've been going on with this. It's probably far too long, and I'll have to try and edit some questions out. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it reasonably interesting. If you'd like me to do more of these and made ones where you've asked some specific questions, then please just let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good day and happy soaping!